You're listening to TFM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. Hello and welcome to TFM's local watering hole, and I am just one of the hosts here, Matthew Rushing, and hopefully you can hear us. We are broadcasting live from the quantum realm, so who knows if you're going to get this episode. And with me, as she is every single week, Christy, have you turned into a talking house?
Yeah, I don't have any holes, so, you're just hearing the reverberations.
Oh, that's what that is. Okay, okay. That makes sense. So, well, I'm glad that reverberations are something that are understandable to...
Yeah, you drank the ooze.
Those people that... Yeah, exactly. So hopefully everybody's drinking the ooze so they can hear us. And of course, we're serving that up here at the 602 Club as we're in the quantum realm. But before we dive into Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, we just want to thank everybody for listening. We really appreciate it. Thank you guys for tuning into the show. And if you've not, subscribe wherever you're getting your podcasts, and that way you'll get this show as well as our bonus shows as soon as they drop. You can also find our ultra-exclusive bonus episodes over on Patreon. That's the VIP room here in the 602 Club. And to do that, you need to go to patreon.com/TrekFM and support us, and then you'll be able to listen to our bonus episodes. We'd really appreciate that. It costs a lot to put this network together, and we can't do it without listeners just like you. So go over to patreon.com/TrekFM. Of course, we would love it if you would follow us and interact with us over on Instagram and Twitter. On Twitter, it's at the 602 Club, and on Instagram, it's at the 602 Club TFM. We've got the entire network on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. You can also find us, of course, at the listeners-only discussion group called the Babel Conference. You can talk to listeners from all over the world there. And you've got the website at trek.fm where you can see all of the podcasts that are happening. You can contact us by email over there at the contact section as well. So many different places to catch up with us. But Christy, I was really interested with just coming into this movie. Obviously, this takes place after Endgame and Ant-Man having a big part of, saving the universe. And I liked the way that for Scott, we were dealing with the idea of this price of fame for him. Because I really felt like his hero status and kind of his change in life is gone to his head a little bit. He was a criminal before, people didn't really know who he was, and now he walks down the street and everybody knows who he is. And that was an interesting place for this character to go from somebody that nobody would want to know who they are because they're a criminal to being somebody who, like, everybody knows who you are. And I appreciated the way this movie kind of dove into that subject a little bit and gave us a Scott who, he's still a really nice guy, but there's some things about him, I think, in this that also aren't so great.
Yeah, with him, I did feel that this was a perfect place to pick up because obviously he's coming off of both the high and the terrible nature of Endgame. The high of feeling the gratitude that he was able to help save the world, of course, but then obviously losing all of the people that we lost as well being the worst part. So I think that he's got some complicated emotions, and they do a good job with starting it off with he's trying to stay positive, and he at least does feel better for being part of the solution. But that obviously it's gone a little too far at this point, as far as his hubris, I guess we'll call it. I think you see it best at the dinner table when he says, "I only helped save the world," and all the families and we never hear about it.
Right. Yeah.
And he's written a book, he's just,
yes.
He's definitely feeling himself right now, and maybe a little too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, that it's not as though everything about this is a bad thing, right? I think, obviously Scott feels a little bit more confidence in himself, because of what he's been able to accomplish. And, he has been able to turn his life around from somebody who was a criminal. And, that's a great story. But I thought that the way that this plays so well into the story is that it makes sense as to why Scott would kind of have lost the drive to help people, because he's now in the position of not only seeing what he can lose, right? He lost all that time with his daughter. He lost a lot of time with other people that he loves. And I think he's very aware emotionally as to the cost of all of that, and is trying to hold on very tightly to the things that he has now. And in some ways that's causing friction, of course, not only with internally for himself, but it's definitely obviously causing friction for him and his daughter, who has seen his example of, helping people, and she now longs to be able to help people in the same way.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I love that they made her want to follow in his footsteps. And I get totally that she knows he wouldn't want her to because of trying to keep her safe. So it does also make sense as to why she would keep it a secret from him that she's been making a suit and sending signals to the quantum realm and things like that. But I will also play devil's advocate for a minute and say I thought it was a little unfair of her to give him such a hard time saying that he hasn't done anything since, because I also think about the depth of the trauma that he's been through. It would make sense that he feels a little lost as well. That, after everything, it's like,
that's a good way to put it.
Where do I even go from here? And maybe also just, I'd like to just have a normal day.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And I feel like she's kind of beating him up about it.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's a really good point. And I would say, when we're thinking about this specifically just for the character of Scott, it is one of the things in which I wish the movie did kind of spend a little bit more time with, because I think understanding the ramifications that this has on Scott's psyche is big, right? I mean, you would be terrified that something would happen to your daughter and take away what little time you've had together. You would be in some ways worried that at any moment something could happen to take away all the good things that are happening to you. And so trying to hold on to that and just enjoy it and kind of push anything else out, I think makes a lot of sense. As to why Scott is the way he is here at the beginning of the film. And I think it is one of the things that the movie references, obviously, here at the beginning, but I wouldn't say that the movie does a great job of kind of bringing that all the way to a good conclusion by the end. And mainly just because I feel like part of the struggle I have with the movie in general is just that it seems like it's always throwing something at you new, and it's not really giving the characters the time, I think, to spend by having moments together, really. And I think, it just feels like there's one thing thrown at you after another, and there's never a really good quiet moment for us to be able to, or a few of them, which I think would be really helpful, especially since what they're positing here for Scott makes complete sense coming out of where he's been. But I don't know if we actually do the thing that the show needs to do to adequately get Scott from this place to the place we kind of want to bring him by the end, in a way that's, I would say, emotionally satisfying as an audience member.
Yeah, I would say I'm with you on that too. It's interesting because in Wakanda Forever, I felt like they really did a great job of giving the big moments a beat to sink in and letting you sit in those feelings. Whereas here it feels the complete opposite. Like you just said, that they're bypassing the big moments where you really need a minute to let it sink in. And that would give the whole movie more depth. I mean, also a perfect example of Janet Van Dyne coming back from and then having to go back again to the quantum realm.
Right.
And they keep saying, you won't ever talk about it. Why won't you just let us know what happened to you? Let's get more into that.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think, one of the things that the movie, I think the movie has, maybe it's this, maybe it's focus, right? Like as you're talking, I'm thinking about, we want to deal more with the emotional struggles of Scott. We want to deal with the emotional struggles of Janet and their trauma that they've been through and how all of this is really affecting them as characters. And I think the movie just in many ways bypasses so much of that. And part of that is that we're so focused and enamored with, I think, the craziness that's going on around us of the quantum realm and just the outlandish nature of it all with this kind of like pop, 1950s B-movie quantum realm sci-fi thing. And instead of, I think, really focusing on the thing that, maybe this is a good question. I feel like that the heart of the Ant-Man films has always been this story between a father and his daughter and that family nature, right? The whole series has been about family. And I feel like this movie, instead of having a story that really focuses on the family, it focuses on the spectacle. And we lose the thing that's made the Ant-Man movies special, which is their focus on the family.
That was more of a statement, but I agree with you.
Well, I'm sorry. But because, okay, so I'm glad that you agree. Because, when I was, the movie itself, I felt like the best moments were honestly between father and daughter. Yeah. As he's teaching her to use the suit, he's kind of realizing who she is and, and then him modeling self-sacrifice to her and working to repair the bond that's kind of been, strained between them. Like all of that stuff to me is the best part of the movie. And it's the part of the movie that connects most with, I think, what made those other Ant-Man movies special, which is heart.
Well, yeah, I mean, it goes back to two families because it's also about Hank Pym and Hope and then trying to finally get her mother and his wife back. And then they meet Scott and he becomes part of their story. And it's also always been about Scott fighting whether or not he wants to continue down that road of being a criminal or be a good dad and get a real job and spend some quality time with the most important person in his life, which is his daughter. And so I think that that's what you also needed more than anything else to carry on into this movie. And that we get a little bit more toward the end of the movie, but it should have been throughout.
Yeah, I think that's 100% right because, as you were mentioning with Hope and her father, Hank, them also dealing with Janet being back and the trauma that they've all dealt with, right? Like that's another family struggle there and another huge family situation that I feel like we just never really dig into. And again, I feel like instead of focusing on the family, we're focused on the spectacle, and we're taking away kind of the thing that's really made Ant-Man special, which has really been about the heart of the matter, and really all of the craziness and outlandishness that happens in the Ant-Man movies is in some ways tangential to the character stories that they've been telling with the Ant-Man movies.
Exactly.
And it's been about the Pyms, and it's been about Scott Lang and his family. I think we've kind of lost that a little bit in this movie. And I do have a question for you. This is definitely a question. Kathryn Newton is playing the daughter here in this film. They did make a switch, interestingly enough, from the actress who played her in Endgame. And so I wanted to ask you, do you feel like that? Did she work as his daughter? Do you feel like it was a good switch?
It's interesting because I accepted it, and I think she was pretty good, but I think that she, for some reason, does come across a little bit more angsty than the previous actress they had play his daughter. And I think that might also be some of that heart we're missing, is that maybe Rudd and the previous actress just had better connection.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
And maybe she just was had a little bit more of a softness to her, I guess. Did you feel that way?
I mean, I think she was fine in the film. I didn't have really any issues with her, but when I think about the fact that Cassie spent a lot of time living alone because of the snap, and I just feel like that her character would be maybe a little bit more cynical, and maybe a little bit more hard-edged, because of what she's been through. And so I think there's something that I would have. I feel like it just, I don't know. I think she's okay in the role. I don't think that she does anything wrong. I just feel like, again, kind of connecting back to what we were just talking about with the idea of the heart of the matter, I feel like that there's something just kind of missing and it's maybe not even necessarily her fault. It's just that, it feels like the focus of the story of her wanting to be a hero and her dad wanting to keep her safe and everything seems so basic. And it feels like the storyline for them would be much deeper for everything that they've been through. So again, I think maybe that the movie just feels like it's lacking the depth and the heart that I'm used to with the Ant-Man films, especially when it comes to the theme of family. And I don't know if Kathryn Newton has anything really to do with that necessarily, as opposed to me just kind of wanting the writing for the film to have more in line with that. And yeah, so I don't think that that's really a thing, in the sense of like, I don't know if it's really her. So I hate to like blame an actress or an actor for a film problem when I really kind of feel like more of this comes down to the writing and the focus of the story. So, because, if that had been different, maybe she would have pulled that off, but I don't know, because that's not what we got. And so it seems like the problem is actually bigger than her to me.
No, that's actually a good point, because when I think about her character as a whole, I do realize part of my problem is just that we don't get an explanation as to why she decides to follow in her father's footsteps and make a suit and signal the quantum realm and all of that. And I think that's an important piece that would have really helped to give their storyline more weight. So
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think you are right that it's more the writing than that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. And so, well, the movie is, obviously playing on the idea of Ant-Man. And of course, Ant-Man is very much about standing up for the little guy. Just read his book. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was, the whole idea of standing up to tyranny, to those that would take away our freedoms and subjugate us, is fits very well, I think, within the structure of the Ant-Man story, because Ant-Man being the smallest Avenger, literally, and I think that was and especially standing up to a villain in Kang who, is one of the biggest of the MCU, and I thought it was interesting too, that I don't know if if you've seen like the meme of like the slave masters like whipping the slaves and they're like all bowed down, and then all the slaves have stood up in the next scene, and they're so much more than the masters. And I really felt like, especially with all the ants that we get here, helping them take over in the end, that we were really playing with that theme, which fits, I think, very well with, this story and with Ant-Man.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. I mean, I think that's the way that they tied it all together. And in one of the bigger strengths of the movie, I think, is that story fits so well with what Scott is all about. And that although he wasn't originally, and Hank got him into this, that he realized that his values are standing up for the people that may not feel the courage to stand up for themselves. And that he's going to fight to the death to protect people in need. I mean, these are great things about him that we've seen in characters like Captain America, for example, that he's had to build up over time. And so I do think that it worked so well for him, and then also was kind of funny tying in with Hank and talking to the ants and having them run in and take over everything, because, in a sense, Kang is right that he's talking about them like they're nothing, like you talk to ants,
Right.
And to a giant, like a human, ants would seem like nothing. But when you have hundreds of thousands of ants, they're not nothing anymore.
Right.
And I feel like that's the whole point. It's saying, even though they're small, when there's many, there's power.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting thing because, of course, the way the movie presents everything, you do have the idea of, a tyrannical leader trying to subjugate people in this way. And, I think that, of course, the movie itself is not nuanced enough to have a discussion about, mob rule and the danger of a mob in general. So we're not going to get into that because the movie doesn't have a place for that kind of conversation. But, I think that this, like you said, this movie is so much about the idea of like, yeah, we have these people that are being oppressed in this way. And therefore, the realization that the many can take out the few doing the subjugation is very interesting. And I did have a question on this too, because I think this is kind of a strange thing that they do with the film, in that they have as the ants go through the quantum realm, they end up with the ability. They like live thousands of years and create this society, to which takes the society that they had already been building and makes it even more impressive. And so I did want to ask you how you felt about that, because I don't know how I felt about that. It almost seemed like too plot pointy. But I don't know. How did you feel about it?
I felt the same. Like it was made up and thrown in to solve a problem rather than letting the... How do we say it again? Letting the problem dictate the story, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean...
you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah,
okay.
No, I absolutely get what you're trying to say. I think there really is something to that. That because I thought it was somewhat fun, and it definitely has the feeling of, you know, a crazy science fiction movie where anything can happen. But there was also a part of me that just felt a little bit like, okay, we need a solution to beat Kang in this, and there's no way that we can do it alone. And so, how do we create an army of unstoppable ants? You know, and okay, well, we'll just, and it's just one of those things where it felt like with the quantum realm, we can blame it on the quantum realm and just use that as our basically get out of jail free card. In the sense that, like, oh, you just say, oh yeah, the quantum realm, and everybody's like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Right. We didn't need the whole rest of the explanation.
Yeah.
That basically it could just be that the ant farm got sucked into the quantum realm along with the rest of the family. And now, because it's the quantum realm, they're giant, or there's millions, or, you know, something like that. Yep. And then that's it. You don't need to keep going and be like, and then they created this whole society. And you're like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I 100% agree with you. So, well, okay, we've seen Kang before because he was in Loki. And of course, we know from that show that he is definitely obsessed with control, and he knows how everything is going to end, and therefore he believes that he's the only one who can save us. Now, what we learn in this movie, of course, too, is that he is not the only Kang. There are many Kangs, and they all control their own little universes, basically. And timelines that they have control over. And he's been exiled. He was exiled to the quantum realm. And so, man, I feel like, you know, of course, he's another Marvel villain with a god-sized ego. And so I felt like, to me, one, he seems like a pretty terrifying villain. And so, what did you end up thinking of him and just Jonathan Majors, you know, as this version of Kang?
So, I'll definitely add first that I was not familiar with Kang from the comics. I just didn't get that into the comics to know about him. So, Loki and then this were my first introductions to him as a character. I will say, though, I felt sometimes with the story here for him that there were also some gaps that it could have really helped if they were explained better. Because, for example, when it's said first that he was exiled, it's just by they exiled me and never really explained until the very end. And I get that, but you could give us something. And then, honestly, for me, there were times that I felt like Jonathan Majors either didn't have the writing to back him up or possibly just felt a little wooden to me, but I was looking for more reason to believe him, and just felt that it wasn't as big of a threat as Thanos, for example.
Interesting.
So, I just didn't know if it didn't seem like you felt the same way, but I don't feel like he's more terrifying than Thanos because of those reasons. But I wanted him to be.
that does really interest me because I feel like he's a better villain than Thanos and scarier. And the reason that is because, you know, Thanos just wanted to destroy half the population of the universe. Whereas with Kang, he's literally erased entire timelines from existence. So, and universal streams, you know, like, and so to me, that's way more terrifying because not only would everything in this timeline that we know would cease to exist completely. It's not just half of it, it's everything. And to me, that's really scary. And I think the other thing that I also found him to be terrifying is that, you know, with and like Thanos, he is completely convinced that he's right, which makes him terrifying. So what he wants is terrifying, and he has the conviction to back that up that makes him, I think, even more terrifying. And so, to me, I think he's a great villain for, you know, the Marvel Cinematic Universe to jump off of with Thanos. And I think what was also kind of terrifying from him is that, you know, Thanos felt like a character who's resolved in his actions. And he's doing them because he believes he has to. But he's not like happy about it, right? Whereas Kang kind of revels, at least this Kang kind of revels in his destruction of timelines. Like, I don't know. To me, that was just so much scarier. So
I just felt like, I guess for me, it was Major's performance because I felt like Michelle Pfeiffer's look on her face when she learned what he did and planned to do made it more scary than he did for me.
Okay.
Yeah. But I get what you mean.
That's really interesting.
I wanted it to be. Like, I agree with what you're saying about the reasons why Kang as a character would be terrifying. I just didn't believe it.
Sure. No, I 100%. And I mean, and I think that's actually a really sad thing is that it doesn't work for you. Because, you know, obviously, if it doesn't work, that's a big problem because that's the movie. And so, man, goodness, that is kind of frustrating too because, in all honesty, for me, Kang is legitimately the best part of the film. Too,
and I said he was the worst for me.
Yeah. So, but I mean, this is one of those things, right? This is where, you know, it's the perspective and how it hits a specific person. So no, I can't blame you at all. You know, if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you, you know, and that's not a good thing because, you know, moving forward, this is the future of the MCU. This is where the MCU is going. And so, you know, that the setup here and in many ways, the main reason this movie actually exists is for him. And so, you know, if that's not working for you, that's just not a good thing. So,
yeah.
And what's interesting then too, for you, it's going to be something that the MCU has to overcome as we move forward, right? With him as a villain. So that's the other thing that they've got to deal with. So it is just interesting to me, you know, with him as a villain, you know, we just have another, a character in the MCU that's a villain that has this desire for ultimate control, right? And it's definitely a thing that all of the MCU villains kind of have this godlike problem of they want to be in control. and it leads them to be kind of horrible, terrible, rotten, no good people, and so, yeah. So another thing about the film that I was kind of struck by as I was watching it, this is a movie where secrets of characters really hurt the whole. And specifically the fact that Janet has kept from her family the story of what happened to her because I guess she thinks it's too dangerous for them to know. But by not telling them, it directly leads to everything that happens, which is, okay. Maybe we should stop keeping secrets from each other.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, that's a perfect thing to talk about because, I mean, we've got, like we mentioned earlier, Scott's daughter keeping secrets from him that she's been working on the suit and the quantum realm satellite with Hank and Hope. And then we've got Janet who never tells any of them about her past and what happened there. And maybe it legitimately is because she wants to live in the moment and not think about that and all of the terrible things she must have gone through. But it would have also really helped in case something ever happened, that she just prepared them ahead of time. So, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It does lead to everything that happens because then her granddaughter doesn't realize the danger of signaling the quantum realm, and then they end up there.
Right. Yeah.
So,
well, and not just her granddaughter, but her husband.
Yeah.
Her own daughter. Yeah. Don't understand this.
That it's a two-way signal.
Exactly. Yeah, I thought that was such a strange thing for the movie to do, and it definitely is something that happens in lots of stories, right? But I felt like this one, it just was so blatant that this whole situation happens because you're afraid of telling people about what happened to you, and by doing so, it then leads to what happens to everybody, and therefore, it creates this weird cycle. And so, yeah, that really stood out to me in the film. Because this is the third Ant-Man movie, and in all honesty, we don't really know exactly if and where this character will continue, and these characters in the MCU, what they have plans for them in the future, and so this does that thing where it tries to kind of tie the trilogy together in a lot of ways. And so, how did you feel about bringing Darren back from the first movie and turning him into M.O.D.O.K?
I felt like it really was kind of unnecessary and leaned too much into the joke. As you've kind of said, in general, you felt that Marvel did a lot when they didn't need to. I think that this was a situation where it was funny sometimes, but then there were times where I'm just sitting there in the theater going, really? You spent more time on the stupid joke with him than you did on the relationships that really matter? I mean, I'm thinking specifically about the line of, Darren, you don't have to be a dick anymore. And he's like, I'm not a dick. Really? Yes. It was a lame joke. Yeah, I laughed, but it was kind of a pity laugh.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. That anytime I maybe even chuckled, it was probably a pity chuckle. And I think that I think that the idea of using the character and the creation of the character for this is not a terrible idea.
Right.
I think the execution is the problem. And I think it really falls off here because it just doesn't work very well, I don't think, in the end. And I think you nailed it when you said the idea that this is it's all just used as a joke instead of there really being anything serious or serious repercussions for the characters, right? You know, we're not really dealing with the fallout of, you know, that first movie and Darren being banished to the quantum realm. It's just a joke. And that makes it frustrating and I think less interesting. Mm-hmm. And in all honesty, to kind of move on to the real reason the other big reason I think it doesn't work is that the effects for M.O.D.O.K are terrible.
Yeah.
It never looks, I mean, what it would look like to have just a big head anyway like that, but this it looks so jarring and ridiculous that it never works. And that really, I think, also ruins the ability for that character to have anything substantial or interesting to do. So it's the writing and the effect itself, which the character is all in effect, just never works.
Yep, you hit the nail on the head with that. The effect looks really bad. It also looks nothing like the original actor, which doesn't help for you to make that connection of it's the same guy that has a bone to pick, he's back. It doesn't forge that together. And then they add the whole ridiculousness of him having like a baby body and the way that he dies and then the joke. It just, everything is like, he's so not a threat. He didn't even need to be in this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think we feel the same.
Yeah. And which, you know, does lead me to asking the question about the effects for the rest of the film, because obviously this entire movie takes place basically in the quantum realm, and you're creating, I mean, everything's a blue screen here. Or, you know, most likely probably some volume work as well. And so does it work? Do you feel like they do a good job in creating all of these places that, you know, the places you will go?
I think with the scenery, it worked. However, I think obviously with M.O.D.O.K, with the other characters that they had the Pims and the Langs interact with, like I'm talking about the slug man with no holes and stuff like that, it wasn't anywhere near as good as you would like it to be and as good as some of the other scenery. Like I'm thinking of when the Pims are in the forest that's like mushrooms and jellyfish and stuff. That actually looked really cool. But as far as the other effect work on characters, it was bad. And I don't know why. And very much leaned into the joke.
Yeah, so after seeing Avatar: Way of Water and then seeing the trailers for this, I thought to myself, wow, this might be a movie that would be worth seeing in 3D. And then they were offering it in IMAX 3D, and so I had bought a ticket to see that on Saturday, and which would be the second time to see the movie. And seeing the movie on Friday, I felt like the problem with the effects here is that there was just this real lack of depth or feel that you're actually in the place that you're supposed to be. Like, you know, I think that's obviously the beauty of what we talked about with both Avatar films, is that it's all, so much of it's fake, right? It's just made in a computer. But it's so consistent and so well done, you feel like you're there. And this movie needed to feel like that, because you're in this quantum realm where none of it's real. All of it's fake. And you need to feel like everything is vibrant and alive and like that you're there, man. But I never really felt like that. You know, I always felt like, you know, we're on some sort of volume set, or that there's just blue screen surrounding everybody and nothing's really there. And I wasn't captivated by much of it. I didn't really love the look of a lot of it. And, yeah, like you said, the new beings there, none of them captured my attention or thought were that interesting. It all just, it felt like being in a Dr. Seuss book, but less interesting.
Yeah. There was one character I thought was cool, and that was the guy that had the giant flashlight for a head.
That was interesting, yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, they looked... You know what? The snail man reminded me of Hotel Transylvania.
Oh, yeah.
Similar kind of effect work, and that's not good when you're trying to do a Marvel movie.
Yeah, it's not. So we obviously knew from the trailers coming in, and this movie kind of has, I would say, an extended cameo with Bill Murray as Lord Krylar. How did you feel about him being in the film? Did you feel like he added anything to the movie, or I'm really interested about that, because obviously he's a big part of the trailer in the sense they make a point to, it's Bill Murray. So
yeah, I wanted him to have more to do, I guess. It was a bummer that it's made such a big deal that he's in it, and then he not only dies quickly, which feels like it's unnecessary to be more than a cameo then, and it kind of feels like it put a bad taste in my mouth having him make a turn from initially being introduced as like leader of the rebellion now that Janet's gone, and then it's, actually he decided to cave to Kang too, and he's turning you in. It just made me sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you said that so well, that it feels like he's really underutilized, honestly, in the movie. It feels more like a stunt casting thing than it actually meaning anything. It didn't have to be Bill Murray in any way, shape, or form. And so, it could have been anybody else, honestly. Anybody could have played this role, and he didn't bring anything to it that, felt special. And that's kind of frustrating when you're watching a movie that has Bill Murray in it like this. You would hope that, okay, there's a reason we're casting him. And I just don't think, it really worked. So that's frustrating.
And if anything, it was a little creepy when they were talking about a woman having needs.
Yeah. But at least, hey, I got to give it to them. They're both, so many times in movies, we just don't have these characters where they're anywhere close in age, right? But Bill Murray and Michelle Pfeiffer, so close in age, and I was like, hey, that's actually nice to see. So that part didn't, that part was nice at least. So I've got a big question for you before we get to our ratings here, because this is something that I came out of this movie thinking. This movie here truly is it's beginning of Phase 5, and it's setting up where we're going next, right? All of Phase 5 and 6 are dedicated in many ways to this whole multiversal problem and Kang and all of that kind of stuff. But my question became, should this movie have come out in Phase 4 and maybe not long after Loki?
I mean, it certainly would make more sense timeline-wise and not feel like such a huge gap from when we finished watching Loki to now. I mean, literally in, our time.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I guess I still feel like you need a lot of the other trauma that you needed to get to this point with Ant-Man as well. So, no. I mean, for me, I would say it probably is fine where it is, but would make sense possibly coming sooner to Loki. But did you end up feeling that it should?
Well, so I just felt like, Phase 4 is such a bumbling, rambling, incoherent mess in the sense that it's not doing a really good job of transitioning away from, the Infinity Saga to what's coming next. And, the one thing that really did that was Loki. It helped kind of okay, give us an understanding of what's coming, right? And then on top of that, you had the Spider-Man No Way Home, which helped crack that open a little bit more. But to me, I just felt like this movie would have been so much better if it had been in Phase 4 and maybe a few, projects after Loki, because I think it would have helped set the stage much more clearly for just what we're trying to do with the MCU. Because I think this is the first time which you really feel like you have an answer. Okay, this is what's going to happen. Yeah. And I think, we've already had Kevin Feige come out and talk about the idea that they are going to be changing the way that they do things. They're going to be kind of pulling back on projects. They're not going to be putting out as many projects. I think they learned from Phase 4 that trying to throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks is not necessarily the best way to do things. And I think this movie would have benefited by being in Phase 4, being closer to Loki, and people would have felt so much more invested in what's happening, rather than kind of languishing in a Phase 4 that kind of left you wondering most of the time, okay, what does this have? Because the problem is the MCU has trained us to think about the whole.
Right.
Instead of the parts. And if it doesn't feel like it's really fitting into the whole, then you're like, okay, I just, what's the point of this? Which is a big curse for the MCU, in that sense. So it takes a lot then for things to stand outside of the MCU in the sense of I could just watch this movie and enjoy this movie without having to have, 45 different things in my brain, project-wise, to make this make sense. And so, yeah, I think there's a big part of this where this movie, because it kind of lacks the heart and the soul of what made Ant-Man special, this becomes more of a stepping stone film, and therefore the stepstone should have come much earlier, I think, to make it. I think it might have actually made the movie a little bit better if it came earlier, just because it would have been, oh, I get it, this movie is giving us where we're going, and now I don't know. I just feel like it's almost too late for its own good, and then it not doing its own thing well, in the sense of servicing the character of Ant-Man and all, that it hurts where it is in the timeline. So
it could be the same situation as Black Widow. We needed a Black Widow back when Thor came out.
100%.
And it's too little, too late.
Exactly. Exactly. No, that is a perfect example. It is a perfect example as to how much timeline means. Yeah. So, no, 100% agree with you there. Christy, with everything that we've talked about, I am fascinated to see what you're going to rate Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania.
So, I think that you and I obviously can have a good debate about what mattered to us and what didn't in this movie. And I know obviously we disagree on Kang, and that was my biggest setback with this. I think that they redeemed themselves for me a little bit toward the end, like I said, with the family connection being a little bit better. I'm thinking specifically of the scene where Cassie finally puts on the suit and he and Cassie are fighting together. I think, though, that overall it leans into the joke too much and focuses way too much on, like you said, the spectacle of it than the character story, which is so essential for Ant-Man in particular, the way it was for Captain America, for example. And it ends up being something that I don't know if I would go back and watch again, or at least if I did, it wouldn't be the first one I would go for sure. So I'm kind of right in the middle and give it a 2.5 out of 5 flashlight men. because there was so much more I wanted for it, and I was excited to see what was coming. And like you said as well, now I'm kind of concerned about how I'm going to like what's coming next, since I was disappointed with the villain.
Yeah, I understand 100%. I think it's very interesting for me because I came out of the movie thinking, oh, maybe that's like a 3.5 out of 5. And the more I've thought about it in our conversation, I'm going to be 100% right with you. It is 2.5 out of 5. I think there's some interesting things to like here. I think there's some good things to like here. But I think the movie fails to do what it should be caring about most doing, which is giving us a third Ant-Man film. And I think and I've told a lot of people this, it's just missing something.
Yeah.
And I think what it's missing is the Ant-Man-ness, which had a very, Peyton Reed had created a lot like the Guardians films, their own feel.
Yeah.
And that own feel was something that was Ant-Man, where, the Guardians have the Guardians feel. And this movie is lacking that in too many ways. And I think, which is a disservice then to setting up this major villain for what's coming. I don't think that helps that. Mm-hmm. And so it makes me wonder, I know that the reviews for this movie weren't great. The ratings for fans were better, but still not great. And I think Marvel could possibly just have a problem on their hands. I think that there's the issue may be that Marvel is just becoming too bloated for its own good, and people are just kind of getting tired of Marvel. Mm-hmm. And that could be a real issue, especially if you're just not creating spectacles and films and characters to which people truly can't wait to go see and really gravitate towards the moment they're on screen. And I just don't think that this one has that. So, Christy, I'm really excited, though, to see what you are going to be recommending to everybody this week in our recommendation section.
So I'm bringing back something I know I've recommended once before, but because there's a new season out, I wanted to remind everyone, if you're not watching Wu-Tang: An American Saga on Hulu, you should be. Because for one, I think even if you're not a fan currently, it'll get you into their music. If you can respect the poetry and actually the geek culture that goes into their lyrics. For example, one of the lines from one of their songs is, "I'm coming in like your neighborhood Spider-Man." Just saying. So I highly recommend checking out the show Wu-Tang: An American Saga. Obviously, it's a fictional retelling of their story, so the actors are not the actual guys from the group, and also because ODB passed away, so he wouldn't be able to. But it's really cool, and they also do a great job of using visual storytelling, where some of the episodes even are meant to be more like a dream sequence than an shot-for-shot actual time telling of the story. So, yeah, really think that you should check it out if you haven't.
Very cool. Well, I'm also going to recommend something to everybody that I have been watching as well. And, this show, we don't talk about Star Trek. We have the rest of the network for that. But I'm going to recommend everybody they go check out Star Trek Picard Season 3. It just began as we're recording this last week. Mm-hmm. And the second episode will be coming out this week. I loved the first episode so far. We're covering it, of course, we're on the Artificial Tango, so I hope people check that out. But it has made me so excited to have a Star Trek back. I think Terry Matalas is just done a great job of creating something that feels like it picks up the mantle from the Star Trek that we knew from Deep Space Nine, Next Generation, Voyager, Enterprise, and has really run with that. And so I'm loving it. So I hope people will check it out. But Christy, if people want to see, what else you've got going on, where would they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Letterboxd, Instagram, and Twitter at BespinBell. I probably need to go on my Letterboxd and rate some more movies. And you can find me, of course, on Facebook in the Babel Conference, And then when I'm not here, you can check me out on my show with my friends Amanda and Teresa called Sabers and Spells on the Skywalking Through Neverland Network. But what about you?
Well, you can find me all over social media under the name Matt Rushing02, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Vero. Please interact with me there. Would love to catch up with you. You can also find me, of course, here on the network doing a bunch of shows. I did mention the Artificial Tango, which we're talking about Star Trek Picard Season 3 now, so hope you'll check that out. Saddle Up about Strange New Worlds, The Orb about Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Warp 5 about Star Trek Enterprise, and Literary Treks about the books and the comics of Star Trek. And then over on the Nerd Party Network, 2 shows. One I did with Drea Kaufman. It's completed. It's called Owl Post. Talked about every chapter of the Harry Potter series, one chapter at a time. And then the great John Mills and I talk about Star Wars each and every week on Aggressive Negotiations. But thank you so much, as always, for joining us.
And y'all come back now, you hear?
Thank you.